The wind picked up the dust and flung it down the empty tracks as the last train pulled away. The town of Crooked Hollow fell quiet again, the kind of quiet that clings to your skin like ash. There wasn't much here. A crooked telegraph pole, a half-leaning station shack, and a dry platform that hadn't seen paint or polish in decades. And she stood still, as if carved from stone, wrapped in a heavy coat 2 sizes too big and a worn felt hat that dipped low enough to hide her eyes. Her boots were scuffed, her shoulders tense. Every inch of her said she didn't want to be seen, and yet she was impossible to ignore. Apache. Alone? Unarmed or so, they thought. The townsfolk had already made their judgments from behind curtains and saloon doors. She'd been at that station since yesterday, barely moving, barely speaking, watching each train pass without getting on. Some said she was waiting for a man. Others whispered she was scouting for trouble. Tala knew how to hold still. Her grandmother had taught her, stillness makes them nervous. Stillness gives you power. But her stillness wasn't for power now, it was for safety. She was tired. Tired of running, tired of hiding. Tired of surviving. She hadn't meant to stop in Crooked Hollow, but her money was nearly gone. Her feet were blistered. And her heart had been broken since the night she buried what was left of her brother's blood-soaked blanket beneath a juniper tree. She didn't know if he was dead, but she did know he hadn't come back. That was enough. As the wind swept through again, Tala's eyes caught motion on the horizon. A rider. Big man. Big horse. The kind of silhouette that made people lock doors before they even saw his face. He rode with certainty, shoulders square, back straight, like a man who didn't doubt where he belonged. She watched him approach slowly, each hoof step ringing louder than church bells in her ears. She didn't flinch when he stopped a few yards from her. Didn't move when he dismounted. He didn't introduce himself. Didn't ask her name. He just looked at her with eyes the color of old iron and said, "You're coming with me." Tala's hand tensed near her coat, where a blade was hidden. "I don't know you," she said flatly. He nodded. "No, you don't." "Then I'm not going anywhere with you. I'm not dragging you," he said. "But I gave my word." She stared. He wasn't like the others. There was no fear in him, no hate, just purpose and something else deep beneath the surface. "Regret, maybe," she demanded. "Why would I go with you?" He reached into his coat slowly, no sudden moves, and tossed a small wrapped bundle at her feet. She crouched and opened it. Her breath hitched. It was her brother's feather pendant, the one she'd braided into his rifle strap the night before he vanished. Only he had it. Only he would have known to send it. She stood slowly. Her voice dropped. "Where did you get this?" "From him," the man replied. "Coda saved my life. Told me if anything happened, I was to find you." Tala's heart beat louder than the wind now. The pain in her chest reopened. "And do what?" she asked. He looked her square in the eyes. "Take you home." That stopped everything. For a long moment, the silence between them stretched. She watched him carefully, searching for deceit, but found none. Just a heavy truth neither of them had asked for. "What's your name?" she finally asked. "Boone," he said. "Boone Carver." He turned to mount his horse, pausing only once. "We ride now or not at all?" Tala looked back at the station one last time. At the boarded-up windows, the watching eyes, the town that would never offer her anything but fear. She bent down, picked up the pendant, and whispered, "You always did pick the strangest friends, Coda." Then she followed. The ride out of Crooked Hollow was long, quiet, and rough. Tala sat stiffly in the saddle, her brother's coat wrapped tight around her as the wind picked up. Dust stung her cheeks. She didn't ask where they were headed. Boone didn't say, but she could tell by the slow, deliberate pace of his horse that he wasn't just trying to leave town. He was putting it behind them. Crooked Hollow had the kind of silence that pressed against your back like a warning. Now the open land gave them a different kind of silence, emptier, but not unkind. She watched the brush pass by, dry and stubborn, like her. Like him, Boone hadn't spoken a word since they left the station. He didn't glance her way or check if she was still behind him. He just rode forward like he'd already made peace with whatever came next. Finally, Tala broke the quiet. "How did my brother save you?" Boone didn't turn his head. His voice came steady and low. "We were on opposite sides. Didn't matter. I took a bullet meant for someone else. He found me bleeding under a ridge, surrounded by men who would have finished the job. And he spared you? He carried me for hours. Gave me water. Kept me warm. Could have slit my throat and left. But he didn't." Tala looked away. "He always said the war wasn't just what you did, it was what you didn't do." Boone gave a slow nod. "He said that too. Right before he passed me the feather." Her fingers brushed the pendant now tied to her coat. She didn't ask more. Some things were better left wrapped in silence. After another hour, the land began to change. The flat gave way to small hills, and the brush grew thicker. A fence came into view, barely holding together, and beyond it, a house sat crooked against the sky. The porch sagged. The roof leaned. The barn had holes like wounds. But smoke curled from the chimney, and horses stood in the corral. Boone dismounted. "Home." Tala climbed down slower, sore from the ride. "You live out here alone?" He opened the gate. "Mostly." Inside, the house smelled of cedar smoke and old coffee. It was plain sparse furniture, a rifle over the door, and a cracked ceramic jug on the windowsill holding what might have been wildflowers. Before she could look further, the sound of small footsteps echoed from the hallway. A little girl appeared, barefoot, red-haired, holding a ragged doll. Her eyes locked onto Tala. Boone stepped forward. "This is Annabelle." The girl said nothing but clutched the doll tighter. Then another child followed, darker skin, darker eyes, older by maybe 2 years. His stare was guarded, deep. He said nothing either. Boone motioned toward him. "I'll lie. Tala's heart still .Apache.half maybe, but enough to be cast out by both worlds." She knelt slowly, meeting the boy's eyes. "Your mother?" Boone answered for him. "Died last winter. Coda brought her here before she passed." Tala looked up sharply. "You knew her?" Boone gave a short nod. She was Coda's friend. He trusted me to care for her boy. I didn't expect the girl, but, well, things change. Tala rose slowly. "And why bring me into this?" Boone didn't flinch. "Because they need someone who remembers. Someone who speaks the old words. Someone who won't let them forget who they are." "And what are you, then?" she asked. "Their protector?" Boone's voice was quiet. "Just trying to do what he asked." Tala exhaled slowly, her chest tight with grief that hadn't settled. "I won't stay long," she said. "I know. I'm not here to save anyone." Boone looked toward the children. "They don't need saving, just remembering." She turned away, her hands trembling slightly. The boy hadn't spoken a word, but his eyes had followed her every move. There was something in them she recognized lost that hadn't yet found its shape. Tala stepped into the corner of the room, set down her bag, and sat on the floor. She didn't belong here, but for tonight she didn't need to belong. She just needed to breathe. Morning broke gently over the dry hills. The sun hadn't yet cleared the ridge, and a thin mist lingered along the scrubland like a secret not ready to be told. Tala stood outside the ranch house, arms crossed, her brother's coat snug around her. She had barely slept, the unfamiliar safety making her restless. She wasn't used to warmth without worry. Boone stepped out onto the porch behind her, pulling on his hat. He didn't say good morning, just looked at her and gave a short nod, like they both understood words were scarce before coffee and daylight. "I need to ride the fence line," he said. "Cattle been getting out." "I'll come," Tala replied, surprising even herself. Boone didn't argue. He led 2 horses out from the corral, his tall black gelding and a leaner sorrel with soft eyes. Tala swung into the saddle, without needing help. Boone noticed. They rode east toward the broken hills and half-rotted fence posts. The land was quiet but alive, grasshoppers clicking through the brush, crows overhead, and the distant bark of a coyote echoing across the mesa. They didn't speak for a while, but the silence wasn't awkward. It was something else. Shared, respected. After a few miles, Tala broke it. "Why do the children stay with you? There are orphanages." Boone glanced her way. "Yeah, there are. And?" he shrugged. "Didn't want them growing up in a place that teaches them to be ashamed of where they come from." Tala's jaw tightened. That answer landed harder than she expected. "They don't speak much," she said. Boone adjusted the reins. "Eli used to, before his mama died. Annabelle talks more to her doll than to people." Tala nodded. "Grief's a strange thing. It don't cry like folks expect it to." Boone rode in silence for a moment before replying. "You speak like someone who knows. I buried my mother under a sycamore tree. My father didn't make it through the last winter. Coda and I were all that was left." Boone's voice was soft. "And now it's just you." She nodded. The wind kicked up dust, dry and bitter. They crested a ridge and paused to look down. At the valley below, a creek ran weakly through the basin. A few straggling cattle dragged from it, ribs showing through patchy hides. Boone pointed. "That's where I first saw your brother." Tala looked down. He came ridden out of that canyon with blood on his hands and fire in his eyes. "Thought he was going to kill me. But instead, he pulled me behind cover, patched up my wound with cloth from his own shirt." She looked at Boone. "That sounds like him." "Didn't say much," Boone added. "But when he did, it mattered. He was always like that. Said too many words weakened your aim." Boone gave the faintest smile. They rode down into the valley, Boone stopping occasionally to check the fence. He fixed a few boards, hammered a nail, adjusted a loose post. Tala dismounted once to tie up a piece of sagging wire with rope from her saddlebag. They worked without speaking, but the quiet between them started to feel like understanding. At midday, they sat beneath a lone cottonwood. Boone passed her a strip of jerky and a canteen. "You said you didn't belong in houses." He said finally. "I don't," she replied, "but you stayed." "For the children, not for you, I figured." Tala looked out across the land. "They need someone who remembers the old ways." Boone nodded. "That's why I asked you to stay." She paused, then said something she hadn't spoken aloud. "In months. My name means Wolf in the grass. My grandmother said I was born to move quiet and strike fast." He raised an eyebrow. "Seems about right. And you?" "Boone Carver." "What does that name mean?" Boone leaned back against the tree. "Just a name. My father carved fences. My mother carved herself away from him." Tala didn't respond. She didn't need to. When they rode back later that afternoon, the shadows were longer, and the silence between them was no longer sharp. It had softened, shaped into something that resembled trust, not fully formed, but no longer just survival. When they reached the porch, Eli was waiting with a piece of wood and a knife, carving slowly. He looked at Tala, then at Boone, then turned and disappeared into the house without a word. Boone turned to her. "He watches everything." Tala nodded. "Good. Means he's still alive in there." Boone didn't smile, but his eyes held something. Like hope. And for the first time in a long time, Tala felt that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't just a place to pass through. It might be the beginning of something she didn't yet understand. The house looked different that evening. Not because anything had changed, but because Tala saw it with new eyes. It was still small, weather-worn, and half falling in on itself. But now, after a day of riding alongside Boone, she noticed the things he hadn't said: the patched roof above the kitchen, the broken porch rail carved with initials, and the children's shoes lined up neatly outside the door. Inside, Eli sat cross-legged near the fireplace, carving something small and careful from a block of cedar. Annabelle hummed to herself, brushing her doll's hair with a twig. Tala knelt beside Eli. "What is it?" she asked softly. He didn't answer, but turned the carving slightly so she could see. A wolf. The shape was rough, but the detail in. The eyes showed patience beyond his years. "You've got your mother's hands," she murmured. "And your uncle's silence." Boone came in behind her with an armful of kindling. He carved that without anyone showing him how. Tala glanced at the boy again. Some things can't be taught. That night, they ate in near silence. Not because there wasn't comfort, but because comfort didn't need noise. Tala noticed Boone watching the children as they ate, not with control, but with something softer. As if he was still surprised they were here at all. After supper, Tala went out to the barn. She couldn't sleep in walls that still whispered. She preferred the open night and the smell of hay. She settled in the loft, lying on a pile of old wool blankets, the stars blinking above her through a hole in the roof. The air was cool and still. Crickets sang in the brush. Just as her eyes began to drift closed, she heard footsteps on the ladder. Boone climbed up slowly, holding 2 mugs. "Figured you'd rather be here than under a roof," he said. She sat up, accepted the tin cup. "Coffee. Strong and bitter." "I thought you didn't speak unless it mattered," she said. He gave a faint smile. "Guess I figured this might." They sat side by side, looking out over the dark ranch. "I don't know what you think this place is," Boone said, his voice low. "But it ain't safe." Tala tensed. "Someone's coming?" Boone shook his head. "Not yet. But the town knows the kids are here. Knows who they are. And they don't forget." She looked at him sharply. "Why keep them, then?" "Because they're mine now, blood or not." Tala studied his face in the dim light. "And what about me?" He looked at her, then really looked. "You were his. That's enough." She didn't know what to say to that. After a long silence, he added, "There's more?" She turned. "More?" He hesitated. "The woman your brother brought here, Eli's mother, she left something behind before she died." Tala's pulse slowed. "What?" Boone pulled a leather pouch from inside his coat. He handed it to her gently. Inside were folded pieces of paper drawings done in charcoal. Symbols. Roots. A name. Tala unfolded the largest piece. Coda. She whispered. It was her brother's handwriting. A map drawn in his careful style. A creek marked with an X, an arrow pointing west. And one word circled. Safe. Boone said nothing. Tala's hands trembled as she held the map. "This is where he was going," she said. "Where he wanted her to go." Boone nodded. "He told her if anything happened to take the children there." "But she didn't make it." "No, she died here." Tala looked out at the stars. "I should take them," she said slowly, "to where it's safe." Boone didn't move. "Maybe, but not yet. That place doesn't mean anything if they don't. Know who they are first." She met his eyes. "That's why you need me." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. She knew. This wasn't just a stop on her way to somewhere else. This was a crossroads. And someone had to stay long enough to teach the children not just how to run, but how to stand. The next morning, the sound of hammering echoed across the ranch. Tala stepped out of the barn, still pulling her braid tight. Boone stood by the porch, nailing fresh boards over a busted window. His sleeves were rolled, muscles tense, brow shadowed. He worked like a man who needed something to fix, because what really needed fixing couldn't be. Annabelle played nearby in the dirt, arranging rocks into a pattern only she understood. Eli wasn't in sight. Tiela walked over. "Where's the boy?" Boone didn't stop hammering. Took a knife and his cedar block. Headed west of the house. Alone? "He's always alone," Boone said, quietly. "I just let him pretend he isn't." Tala narrowed her eyes toward the hills. "I'll find him." Boone didn't argue. He just handed her a canteen and nodded. She found Eli beneath a ridge where the rocks opened like a natural amphitheater. He sat cross-legged on a boulder, carving again, this time a bird. A hawk. When she stepped close, he didn't flinch. Tala knelt beside him. "You ever see a hawk up close?" Eli nodded once. She pointed to the carving. "Their wings don't flap much. Just stretch and ride the wind. That's why they're strong. They don't waste energy on what they can't change." Eli said nothing, but he looked at her, not through her. That was progress. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a strip of leather. "Your uncle used to braid feathers into his gear before battle. Said they reminded him who was watching from above." She handed the strip to Eli. "Tie that to your knife. Or your carving. Or not at all. Just don't forget who you come from." He stared at it for a moment, then tucked it into his pocket. He still didn't speak, but when she stood to leave, he followed. Back at the ranch, Boone was pouring water into the trough when he spotted the rider. Dust rose behind the lone horse on the ridge, too fast, too sure-footed to be just a ranch hand. Tala's body stiffened when Boone called out, "Company." She stepped beside him as the rider approached, lean, gray coat, curled mustache, rifle strapped across his back. His horse was foaming at the mouth from the ride. He stopped 10 feet away. "Boone Carver," the man said. "Sheriff Martin sends word." Boone didn't flinch. "Say it, Jess." The rider's eyes flicked to Tala, then back to Boone. "Town council heard you got yourself company. Apache company." Boone's jaw set. "This here's my guest. And my house is my business." Jess shifted in the saddle. "Crooked Hollow don't see it that way. Some folks are scared she's a scout, that she's calling trouble down from the hills." Tala's hand hovered near her waist. Boone stepped slightly in front of her. "You tell Martin," Boone said, voice calm but iron hard, "that this land is outside town reach. And if they try to come take her or those kids, they'll have to bring more than wagon words." Jess gave him a long look. "You're macking enemies you don't need." "I've had worse," Boone muttered. The rider tipped his hat and turned without another word, disappearing over the ridge. When the dust settled, Tala turned to Boone. "Is that what you wanted me to see?" she asked. "That they're coming?" Boone finally looked tired. "I wanted you to know what you're staying for." She nodded. "I know." That night, while the children slept and the wind howled through the broken fence posts, Boone pulled an old crate from beneath the floorboards. Inside were folded army papers, a battered cavalry jacket, and 2 pistols, still oiled, still ready. He laid them on the table without a word. Tala stood across from him. "You think this'll turn to war?" "It already did," Boone said. "You just weren't here to hear the first shot." She looked at the map again, the one her brother had drawn, and traced the fated path west with her finger. "Your place is here," she said. "Mine might not be." Boone looked up sharply. "You want to leave?" "No," she said simply. "But I need to know what he meant. What safe was. Why he didn't go himself." Boone stepped back, voice low. "I think he knew he wouldn't make it, so he sent what mattered most ahead." Her eyes flicked to the hallway where Eli and Annabelle slept. "And now we're all that's left to carry it," she whispered. Boone nodded. She picked up one of the pistols. "I can still shoot," she said. "I was counting on that." Outside, the wind carried the smell of smoke. And far off, over the rise, someone was watching the ranch with binoculars and taking notes. They weren't alone anymore, and they wouldn't be for long. The smoke came just before dawn, not thick. Enough to be fire, but enough to worry Boone. He stood on the porch, rifle slung across his back, watching the pale gray mist twist through the trees east of the property. It moved too slow to be natural. Too purposeful. Tla joined him without a word. She was already dressed, boots laced, her brother's coat wrapped tight around her. "You smell that?" Boone asked. She nodded. "Grease, lamp oil. That ain't cook fire." He exhaled through his nose. "They're sending a warning." They already gave one. Guess they didn't like how it was received. Boone stepped off the porch, every inch of his frame tense. "Stay here. Watch the children." But Tala grabbed her rifle and followed. Not a chance. They moved fast, following the scent and the haze, until they reached the northern edge of the property. There, tied to a fence post, was a warning. A rabbit dead, gutted, its body marked with red paint and crude tribal patterns, hung upside down from a leather strap. A mockery. A message. Tala's stomach twisted. Boone stared, face hardening. "They're trying to stir fear," she said, "using our own symbols." Boone pulled the rabbit down and tossed it to the dirt. "Trying to make it look like it's you." "No," she said coldly. "They're trying to make it look like I brought danger with me, and that you're too foolish to see it." He looked at her then. "They're wrong." She turned back toward the house. "Tell that to the next rider." By midday, the ranch was quiet again, but there was a charge in the air. A pressure building. Boone sharpened blades in the barn while Tala trained Eli in the yard, showing him how to hold a slingshot properly, how to aim without tensing his neck. He was quiet, as always, but he watched her every move, mimicking her posture, her grip, her breath. Annabelle sat by the porch, humming, plucking feathers from a pillow and tying them to twine. Tala crouched beside her after practice. "What are you making?" Annabelle held it up shyly. "Dreamcatcher, for Eli." Tala smiled faintly. "That's a good one." "He doesn't dream anymore," Annabelle said quietly. "He just wakes up scared." Tala reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind the girl's ear. "That's why we protect him." That night, Boone pulled a long oilcloth from the cellar and unwrapped 2 repeating rifles and a box of ammunition. Tiela raised an eyebrow. "Planning a war?" "No," Boone said, "planning not to lose one." They sat at the table, the map between them, the one Coda had drawn. Tala traced the river bend again. "The route west. I think he wanted us to move," she said, "to follow this path and leave the ranch." Boone asked Dot. She shook her head. "Not yet." "But if we don't?" "Have a plan. The town's gonna make one for us." Boone rubbed his jaw. "You trust that map?" "I trust the man who drew it." The knock came after midnight. Not loud but firm. Once Tla grabbed her pistol. Boone stood up slowly, cocking his rifle. The children were already in the root cellar. Tala had trained them for this the night the rider came. Boone opened the door. One man stood outside. Not Sheriff Martin. Not just. This one was younger, early 30s. Long black coat, dusty boots, scar down one cheek like a lash mark. His hat was pulled low, but his voice was smooth. "Evenin', Mr. Carver," he said. "I've come with a proposal." Boone didn't lower the rifle. "Don't make many deals at this hour." The man smiled faintly. "Then let's make it short." He stepped into the lamplight, just enough to be seen. His eyes found Tala behind Boone and lingered. "The town's nervous," he said. "About her, about the children, about what you're hiding up here." Tala stepped forward. "And you?" He turned to her. "Me? I don't care who you are. I care what causes problems. And you're drawing attention." Then stop looking, she said flatly. His grin widened. Tell you what, you leave by week's end. Take the girl, take the boy, take her. He nodded at Tala. Ride west. We'll forget this ever happened. Boone's eyes narrowed. And if we don't? The man tilted his head. Then we come back, with lawmen and rope. He stepped back into the night. Think about it, Boone. He called as he walked away. You're a good man. But good men don't win out here. Then he was gone. Tala stared at the door long after it shut. Boone lowered the rifle. But his hand didn't leave the stock. They'll come sooner then. We thought, she said. He nodded. Then we don't wait. By morning, Boone had already packed 2 saddlebags with ammunition, dry biscuits, water skins, and an old hunting knife with a chipped handle. Tala stood over the map on the kitchen table, retracing the route West Coda had drawn, her finger. Paused over the bend in the river marked with the faint X. We ride tonight, Boone said, buckling a bedroll to his saddle. No good waiting for a lynch mob to get organized. They'll follow, Tala replied. The man from last night, he didn't bluff. He made a promise. Boone nodded. And I heard it. Annabel sat quietly in a corner, her doll in her lap. Eli stood by the window, carving again this. Time a horse. His grip was tight, his strokes aggressive. He was listening, even if he didn't speak. We'll head north first, Boone said, pointing at the map. Throw them off. Circle back west by the canyon. There's a shallow stream. We can follow for cover. Tala folded the map carefully, tucking it into her coat. We'll have 2 hours after sundown, she said. Less, if someone's watching. Boone turned to the children. Pack what you can carry. 1 bag each. You leave anything behind. It stays, Annabel whispered. Even Dolly? Tala knelt beside her. No, Dolly rides with us. That brought the first smile of the day. They left just after the sun dipped behind the hills. The last light staining the sky red. Tala rode ahead with Eli behind her. Boone carried Annabel wrapped in his coat, her head against his chest. The horses moved fast but quiet, cutting through dried grass and ghost trails. The first 2 miles were uneventful, but at the ridge near the old sheep fence, Tala spotted its smoke again. This time closer. And this time, not just smoke. Boone cursed low. They lit the trail. He was right. Someone had set fire to the path along the lower ravine, a tactic meant to block escape and drive them back into open land where they'd be visible. Tala scanned the horizon. They're herding us like cattle. Boone turned his horse hard west. Then we stop acting like cattle. They veered off the marked route, plunging down a dry arroyo that hadn't seen water in years. Rocks slid beneath hooves and thorny. Branches scratched at their faces and arms, but they kept going. By the time they reached the dry stream, the night was black and the wind howled. They made camp inside a hollow of stone. Not much shelter, but enough cover to keep a fire low and unseen. Tala rubbed Annabel's arms with her own body heat. The girl had gone quiet, her face pale. Not fear, just exhaustion. Boone handed Tala a canteen. I'll take first watch. Tala shook her head. We'll split it. Wake me in 2 hours. He hesitated. You trust me? She looked at him hard. Coda did. I don't take that lightly. Later that night, Tala sat awake, back against the stone wall, pistol in hand, eyes. Scanning the dark, a coyote howled somewhere distant. Then, beneath it, another sound. Metal on stone. A horseshoe. She tapped Boone's boot with her toe. He was already halfway awake. Someone's trailing us, she whispered. He nodded. I count 2 riders, maybe 3. Close. Tala scanned the canyon rim. We have the higher ground. But they know the land. Boone rose, rifle ready. You take the kids. Head west. Follow the dry stream until it forks. I'll hold them. Tala stood. No, you won't. He paused. You plan to argue? She looked him square in the eyes. No, I plan to fight beside you. The men came fast, thinking they'd catch them sleeping. The first bullet whizzed past Boone's shoulder. He dropped to one knee and fired. One rider yelped and veered off. The second one dismounted and tried to circle wide through the brush butt. Tala caught him in the dark, her aim sharp and clean. One shot to the leg, one to the arm. Boone charged forward, drawing fire away from the camp. The final rider hesitated, and that was all Boone needed. A flash of light, a single echo, and the horse galloped away without its rider. Then silence again. Just the creak of saddle leather and the wind. Tala crouched beside Boone. You hurt? Not my blood, he grunted. They dragged the wounded man into the moonlight. His face was dirty, one eye swollen shut. Boone stared down at him. Who sent you? The man spat blood. They're not going to stop. Not until that half-breed and that girl are hanging. Tala raised her pistol, but Boone grabbed her arm. No, he said. We leave him. Tala hesitated, then nodded. They tied the man's hands, bound his wounds just enough to keep him breathing, and left him under the stars. They rode again before dawn. No more words. No more smoke. Only the pounding of hooves and the distant memory of gunfire. And behind them, the trail they'd once trusted now ashed. The river came into view just after dawn. It wasn't wide, but it was fast. The spring rains had thickened it, churning the muddy waters into a steady, roaring current. The land around it was soft and uneven, thick with brush and tangled roots. A crossing here wouldn't be easy. Boone reined in his horse and dismounted. The others followed, silent with exhaustion. Tala stepped beside him, her legs aching from the ride, her hands raw from holding the reins too tight. She stared at the water, then at the path her brother had drawn on the map. This is the mark, she said. Coda said to cross here. Boone didn't argue, but his brow furrowed. That? Current's too fast for the girl's horse, he said. And I don't like the bank on the far side. Could give way. Tala crouched and touched the ground. The mud sucked at her fingers. It's still safer than turning back. We're one town away from bounty hunters and rope. Eli stood behind them, holding Annibal's hand. Neither child spoke, but both were watching, listening, feeling the tension roll off the adults like heat. Boone nodded slowly. We do it fast, one at a time. I'll go first, clear the far side. Then you bring the girl. I'll catch you both if the horse gives. Tala turned to Eli. You come last. Stay with me until I call. He gave the faintest nod. Boone mounted again and urged his horse into the river. The water surged around the animal's legs, tugging hard, but Boone pressed forward. The gelding stumbled once, but Boone stayed calm, guiding him to a gravel patch near the far bank. He made it across. Turning to wave them on. Tala helped Annabel mount the smaller sorrel. The girl looked up at her, fear tightening her tiny mouth. You're gonna hold tight, okay? Tala whispered. Boone's waiting. He won't let you fall. Annabel nodded, tears threatening but not falling. Tala smacked the horse's flank. Go, the horse stepped in. The water rose fast, halfway up its sides by the middle of the river. It slipped once. Annabel gasped, but Boone was already in the water, grabbing the reins, pulling her across by hand. Together, they made it. One left. Tala turned to Eli. He already had his feet in the river. No, she said. Not yet. Wait for me. He looked at her, jaw set, stubborn like his uncle had been. Tala mounted her own horse and reached down. Climb up. We ride together. He hesitated, then grabbed her arm. She hauled him up, settling him behind her. Wrap your arms around my waist and don't let go. They rode in. The water struck hard, colder than she expected. Her horse shivered, legs struggling for footing. She whispered in its ear, soft and firm, guiding it with pressure from her knees. Halfway through, the current surged. A tree limb struck the horse's leg.It reared. Tala screamed for Eli to hold on. The world tilted sideways, and they were in the water. Boone jumped in before she even surfaced. Tala fought to get Eli above the current. The boy gasped, coughed, clung to her neck. She couldn't feel the bottom. Boone reached them, one arm around each of them, dragging them toward the shallows. Mud swallowed her boots as they reached the bank. They collapsed in the brush, coughing, soaked, freezing, but alive. Eli sat up, shaking like a leaf. Annabelle ran to him, wrapped her small arms around his chest. Tala met Boone's eyes across the space. "That almost killed us," she said, breathless. "Yeah," Boone replied, "but we're across." She pulled the map. From her coat it was soaked and torn, but the ink still clung to the paper. Boone pointed to a tree line ahead. "The safe place, how far?" Tala studied it, breath still coming in short bursts. "Half a day, if no one's behind us." Boone looked toward the hills they'd left. "I'd like to believe that," he said, "but I think someone is." Tala nodded. "Then we don't stop." She turned to Eli, touched his cheek gently. "You saved yourself today. That means you're strong. And strong means we keep going, even if it hurts." Eli didn't speak, but for the first time he reached for her hand and held it. They moved. Fast through the brush, wet boots squishing, rifles reloaded, eyes sharp. The river was behind them now, but ahead somewhere. In those hills was the place Coda had marked with hope. If they could reach it, maybe they'd have a chance to stop. Running Dot if they couldn't, they would make their stand there. By late afternoon, the hills rose high and dry before them, barren. Steep, sun-baked. Tala led the way now, the crumpled, half-torn map clutched in her hand, her eyes darting between ink and horizon. The trail Coda had drawn was more feeling than fact now, but she followed it anyway. She had to. Boone carried Annabelle in the saddle again, while Eli walked beside Tala, one hand on her stirrup. The boy hadn't said a word since the river crossing, but his eyes never left the ridge lines, scanning for movement like he'd been born with that instinct. "Almost there," Tala whispered to herself. Boone caught up beside her. "You sure?" She didn't look at him. This was where he meant. "I know it. I feel it." They crested a low hill, and there it was, a small valley tucked between stone bluffs, half hidden by brush and shadow. A trickling stream cut through its center. A collapsed wooden gate, weather-worn and leaning, marked the entrance, a ranch, or what was left of one. Tala dismounted and walked forward slowly, heart thudding. The house was nothing but Bones' half. The roof caved in, windows gone, vines crawling through the cracks. But the foundation stood. A barn, still standing, leaned but held. A broken windmill creaked in the breeze. She stood in the middle of it, turning slowly. "This was it," she whispered. "My grandfather's land. Before the cavalry drove us off. Before they marked it for the white settlers." Boone joined her, Annabelle still in his arms. "Your brother found it again?" Tala nodded. "He found the old title deed among our grandmother's things. He knew this was ours. He just never got the chance to bring the children here." Boone let out a long breath. "You think it's safe?" Tala's gaze swept the hills. "It's not marked on any maps. No nearby roads. And only someone who knew what to look for would find it." Boone handed Annabelle down. She immediately ran toward the barn, curiosity returning to her small face. Eli stood in the grass, turning slowly, like he could feel something too. Then, for the first time, he spoke. "It smells like my mother's stories." Tala's heart squeezed. Boone froze. She knelt beside Eli. "What did she say?" She said one day we'd find the place where the wind stopped hurting. Boone swallowed hard. Tala rose. This is where we stay. Boone nodded. Then let's make it ours. They worked fast. Boone patched holes in the barn first, rigging up the old stall doors and moving the horses inside. Tala scavenged for supplies, old rusted tools, a dry can of nails, scraps of tar cloth and torn rope. Eli helped her string a tripwire alarm across the ridge trail. Annabelle swept the barn floor with a branch, humming the same tune she always did. For a while, it felt almost possible. Tala stood outside at dusk, staring at the ridge beyond. Boone walked up beside her, his rifle resting against his shoulder. You know they'll still come, he said. I know, she whispered. They'll track us. Might take days, might take weeks, but they'll come. Let them, she said, eyes hard now. This time we don't run. Boone nodded. This time we remember who we are. That night the stars were cold and clear above them. Sat by the fire sharpening a blade. Tala leaned back against the barn wall, her boots crossed, pistol on her lap. Annabelle slept curled beneath a wool coat, and Eli lay beside her, eyes open, just watching the sky. Tala turned to Boone. Why'd you stay in Crooked Hollow after the war? He hesitated. Didn't have anywhere else. Thought maybe if I kept my head down long enough, I'd stop being the man I was. And did you? Boone looked at her. No, but I became someone else. She nodded slowly. Maybe that's enough. Boone glanced at the children. You think we can raise him, right? Teach him the truth without turning him bitter? Tala didn't answer for a long moment. Then she said softly, Coda used to say we don't choose the fire, just what we carry through it. They both sat quiet, listening to the wind move through the dry grass. And then, far off, a crack. A branch snapping under weight. Tala sat up straighter. Boone stood.
Rifle already in hand. Eli opened his eyes, alert. Annabelle
stirred. Boone didn't say anything. He just looked at Tala and gave a slow nod. They weren't alone, not anymore, but they were ready. The moon sat low and swollen, casting silver over the valley where the broken ranch waited, crouched like an old animal holding breath. Tala stood beside Boone, her rifle steady in her hands. Her eyes were sharp, her back straight, but her chest ached. Not from fear. Fear had burned off long ago. What filled her now was memory. Her brother's voice, her mother's songs, her grandmother's whispers about the land. Behind her, Eli. And Annabelle lay hidden beneath the floorboards of the barn, wrapped in wool and hope. Boone scanned the ridge. 3 riders, maybe 4. They're waiting for first light. Tala nodded. They want to scare us out. They think we'll run. They're wrong, Boone smirked. I hoped you'd say that. They worked in silence, laying traps. In the brush, breaking branches to funnel the riders toward the rocky slope where the land narrowed. Tala dipped rags in oil and packed them into glass jars. Boone brought the dynamite 2 sticks left over from a mining job years ago. By the time the eastern sky turned pale, they were ready. And then they waited. At sunrise, the riders came. 4 men, all armed. All familiar, one of them the same snake-eyed stranger who had offered Boone a deal on his porch. They rode down slow, rifles slung over their shoulders, dust kicking up behind them. You 2 are making a mistake, the lead man called. Boone stepped out into view. You've already made yours, he said calmly. Tala stood on the barn roof, rifle raised. One of the men reached for his holster. She fired. The bullet grazed his shoulder and he dropped from his horse, screaming. The others scattered, ducking for cover. Boone lit the rag on one of Tala's jars and hurled it down the slope. It burst in flame, licking up dry grass and smoke. The riders cursed. The second one fired at the barn, but his bullets sank into empty wood. Boone returned fire, fast and measured. One rider's horse bucked and fled. 2 down, 2 left. The leader circled wide, flanking Boone, but Eli, hidden behind a haystack with a slingshot, struck his horse square in the eye with a stone. The animal shrieked, reared, and threw its rider. To the ground, Boone was on him in seconds. The last man turned tail. Tala watched him ride. She could have taken the shot, but didn't. Instead, she climbed down slowly, every step deliberate. Boone stood over the fallen man, breathing hard, rifle barrel pressed to his chest. "You brought this," Boone said. "And you lost." The man spat in the dirt. "You think this land forgives what you are? You think you can raise half-breeds out here like nothing happened?" Boone's hand didn't flinch. "I'm not asking for forgiveness." Tala stepped beside him. "And they don't need it," the man glared. "You'll be hunted, always." Boone nodded. "Maybe, but we'll be ready." They didn't kill him. They let him limp off bloody, broken, and humiliated. Sometimes survival was the sharper blade. That night the wind was quiet. No gunfire, no shouting, no hoofbeats in the dark, just the soft sound of Annibal's breathing, the rasp of Ali's carving knife as he shaped something small from a block of cedar. Tala sat with Boone on the porch of the broken house, their shoulders brushing. "Do you think they'll come back?" she asked. "Eventually," he said, "but not right away. They'll need time to spin a new lie." She looked toward the valley, bathed in starlight. "This place was stolen once," she whispered. "But now we've taken it back." Boone nodded. "And we'll keep it." Tala looked at him. "You were right to come to me that day, at the station. Even if you didn't know why." He turned his head. "I knew why. I just couldn't explain it then." She smiled, the first real smile in days. "You gonna stay?" Boone looked at her long and quiet. "This land needs fences. These kids need raising. This woman," his voice dipped, "she don't need saving. But she's worth standing beside." Tala didn't blush, but her eyes softened, and that was enough. In the weeks that followed, the barn stood taller. The windmill grown less. The creek ran cleaner, and laughter, real, unguarded laughter, found its way into the valley, riding on the backs of 2 children who had every reason not to trust the world, but chose to build one anyway.